Hey guys, this is Nick from Nick's Listening Space, and today we're going to talk about the SMSL AO10 amplifier. So why would anybody buy a $100 amplifier in 2026? At least on paper, this shouldn't be interesting because it's small and it's affordable and it's Class D. And it's really not pretending to be anything more than that. Now, after living with this amp for a while, I really started to ask myself a couple of different questions. And what is the appeal of a $100 amplifier in today's market with so much available? And I don't think that it's about chasing specs or power or prestige, but rather I think this is about removing friction, because a lot of modern day hi-fi stuff, and especially the budget stuff that I review on this channel, comes with baggage in the form of power bricks or cable clutter or just overbuilt features that you never really use. So I think that sometimes we get gear that's really great, but maybe we don't need it all. And I think that that's really where something like this can come into place. Or at least if your criticism is that some of these other amplifiers are doing too much, this is a great solution for that. So full disclaimer, this guy was sent to me to review by Schiit Audio. Now, everything in this video is my opinions and my opinions only. Now, this is the SMSL AO10, and it is one of the cheapest brand new amplifiers that I think you can find on the market right now. Now, somehow this guy really ended up challenging my assumptions of what we could get out of such budget gear, and I'll explain more about that when I get into the sound quality. But just over the past year, I've reviewed a number of Class D amplifiers in this sub $300 price point. And really what I have to say is that all of them are good. None of them are bad. And really, if anything, the quality of the sound that I'm getting out of these budget amplifiers, gives me more fear for what the future of audio looks like. Because if you can create such a small compact package that I think dishes out what most people are going to want, what else do you need, right? And obviously that's a little bit hyperbolic because, obviously this isn't going to replace your full-size integrated amplifier with 10 inputs. But it is good enough to make you wonder how much of all that you actually need. So obviously when it comes to the cost of performance, it's hard to argue with what we get here. The AO10 just feels like a baseline experience, or rather, how little can we actually spend and still get an enjoyable kind of emotional experience out of it. And so I think one thing that immediately sets the AO10 apart from all the other things that I reviewed was the fact that it comes with a standard IEC power cable. It doesn't have a wall wart, there's no external brick, no weird proprietary power supply or any kind of special cabling here. So that may sound trivial, but when you live with a small compact desk or even you're seeking to have a minimal hi-fi system, all of those things kind of negate or rather take you out of the spirit of minimalism. And so, power bricks, they multiply. They're heavy, they're awkward, and they're also impossible to organize and keep a nice, clean system. So what appears on the surface to be minimal ends up creating just this cable management nightmare on the back ends. And all of that just kind of creates this ironic situation for somebody pursuing a kind of small, compact, and minimal system. So when Schiit Audio asked me to review this amplifier, I did not hesitate because I was really excited to review a small Class D amplifier of this size with something more standard of fare. And I didn't expect magic from this guy, but I did expect it to remove friction from how I set up my system, right? Now, I want to talk about my first impressions here because I think that unboxing the AO10 was kind of exactly what you'd expect from a device at this price point. It's very simple and it's clean and it's protected. There's really nothing else I can say about the packaging. It's really the unit itself that I think surprises me because I have to say that it does feel like something out of the mid-2000s. It's more akin to a Best Buy special or some of those older kind of 90s receivers. but there is just kind of like this early 2000s honesty to it that you just don't really see much anymore. And I say honesty because this device is not trying to be anything it's not. You're buying a $100 device. It is not flashy. It is not like this precious thing. It's just simply functional. And so that reflects in the build quality. The chassis here is this thin folded aluminum enclosure with a painted finish. The front panel is just a plastic kind of faceplate. It's just got this kind of old school feeling to it. And then the screen itself has got this old school kind of LED display. Now, you can turn the screen off, which is kind of nice. Some people may want more visual polish, but for me, I actually kind of like it in that stealth mode. Now, around the back, we get some standard binding posts. There's really nothing fancy about these, but there's nothing offensive either. We get a single-ended RCA input and no XLR on this guy. Now, Bluetooth is here on this device because I think everything has Bluetooth nowadays. And then one of the other things you get on this guy is a standard kind of 12-volt trigger in and out. Now, this is kind of nice for this particular device because I think it increases its usefulness, especially when we're talking about trying to hide this particular amplifier in a rack or out of sight. And again, a standard IEC power cable. I'll stop repeating myself eventually here, but I do think this is a really important feature to highlight with this particular device. The menu system on this particular guy is where I think I have the most issues, or at least it's the most unintuitive. Now, the menu system on this guy I think is my biggest complaint because I want to say that it's a little bit unintuitive. And the manual is comically small, and thankfully it is available online because you cannot read the size of this guy. Now, functionality though, you get basic EQ and you also get a set of filter presets that you can switch between. And of course input switching between line, level, and also Bluetooth. Now, when it comes to the EQ and the functionality, it's very similar to the A80 and the ELAC A100 that I recently reviewed. And with those, you basically get a treble control and a bass control. And as I've already said, I think that's one of another kind of layered superpower on top of what is already a really great component. So that's just kind of adds that second layer of tweakability on the back end. I want to talk about the sound quality, and this will be kind of a nuanced discussion. I have had this thing hooked up to a couple of different kind of pathways or chains, and then kind of in addition to that, I'll talk about it with my reference system, and then I'll also talk about how it performs with kind of my KEF LS50s as well as my ELAC debuts. In the first chain, I'm using my Fosi Audio ZP3 preamplifier and my Topping D50 D3 powering my ELAC debuts. And I will be doing a full review of the Fosi Audio ZP3 preamplifier coming up here shortly, so stay tuned and look out for that review. Now, out of the box, I think that the AO10 sounds neutral or maybe even a little bit flat. I think that once you engage the onboard EQ in this guy, something clicked, at least for me, because for me, it created a little bit more dynamic kind of presentation. Now, I've been listening a lot to this artist named Toki Monsta, who has an album called Midnight Menu, and she's kind of a producer for R&B and hip-hop artists alike. And this particular album is one that is so layered and littered with kind of low-end bass. So this is a really treat of an album, I think, to listen to on a particular amplifier like this. Now, never once did I feel like I needed more bass. This thing is dishing it out along with my ELACs. So if anything, out of the gate, I felt the need to maybe increase the treble a little bit. Now, there is like a grounded, kind of relaxed quality to the sound here. I think that with the ELACs, it's genuinely hard to believe that this is a $100 Class D amplifier. I think that the low end isn't thin here in any way, and the top end kind of avoids all that sharp analytical edge that I think people associate with Class D. Now, the presentation is smooth, mellow, and spacious. I would say this actually doesn't sound Class D. It sounds more Class AB if you really want to know what I think. I think that where it falls short is possibly the mid-range resolution and just like that outright authority at higher volumes. Because at 8 ohms, we are realistically only around 40 watts. So that is below what the ELACs are recommended. Now, at my normal listening levels of 50 dB to 70 dB, that's pretty much more than enough. I think if you're trying to expand more than that, you're probably gonna want more amps. An artist that I speak about oftentimes on these reviews is an artist named Joy Oladukin, and she's a female singer, and I just love her vocals. They're so lush and warm, and like particularly, I felt as though the decay on her vocals with this was very natural. I really found myself just kind of drifting away to this album, and I never really felt like I was missing something. For this next portion, I want to talk about kind of comparisons and really like how does this stack up to some of the other amplifiers that I've recently reviewed? And you might want to know that, right? You know, one of the things that I recently reviewed was the Aiyima A80. Now the A80 uses a TPA3255 Texas Instrument amp chip, and it also has post-filter feedback. Now the A80 uses a TPA3255 amp chip with post-filter feedback. Now it has more control and more clarity and more power on tap, especially into more difficult loads. At least on paper, the A80 almost doubles into 4 ohms, whereas this guy doesn't. So when we are using an amp like that, it will pair better with speakers like the KEF LS50s. Now the A80, I think, is clearer and just better technical match for those speakers. Now with speakers like the KEF LS50, the A80 is clearly the better technical match. Now the A80 is going to have more soundstage depth and greater resolution at higher volumes. I think emotionally though, the AO10 feels like a warmer, more relaxed, kind of laid back experience. The A80 is going to engage you with more detail. The AO10 is going to engage you with tone. Now, another amplifier that I've recently reviewed this past year was the Fosi Audio ZA3. Now the ZA3 sounds immediately more transparent and crystalline right out of the gate. Now there's more air and more sparkle here and just more perceived detail. Now by comparison, the AO10 sounds thicker and warmer, but it also sounds less spacious and also more vocal forward. So the vocals on the AO10 are lusher, smoother, and more inviting. I think they're more intimate. There is almost a tube-like quality to the SMSL that I'm not getting with the A80. Now when we go back and forth, the AO10 is actually closer in character to my line magnetic LM34IA than the ZA3 or the A80. And so, you know, to compare it to the line magnetic LM34IA, the LM, the line magnetic, delivers depth and harmonic bloom and a scale that I just don't think the AO10 can touch. Now, tonally, it's shockingly close because for $100, the AO10 delivers a flavor that normally associated with tube amps, you know, costing way more money. I think what you lose possibly is this nuance and dimensionality, but like the tonal DNA, I think is there. I will talk a little bit about the ELACs versus the KEF LS50s and really what the performance was like. So, you know, with the KEFs, the AO10 definitely sounds thinner and more hollow at first, okay? So you immediately want more current, or there is a sense rather that I want more power. Now, longer listening sessions kind of revealed that the AO10 is a wider, more holographic soundstage, but the amp is still clearly underpowered. Now, my preference with this amp might be with the ELACs. They are more forgiving and more grounded and more enjoyable across a wider range of music. But the KEFs you know, they still do their kept thing with imaging and timing and clarity. It's just that I don't think this amplifier is bringing out the best in those. So now I want to talk a little bit about pairing this thing with a better preamplifier. Now, because I think this is where shit got very real for me, because my perception was that the AO10 needs more power, but maybe not. And if I had any complaints with the AO10, they almost immediately faded away. I don't know why, but when I had this thing paired with my Freya Plus, the Freya Plus just greatly expands its sense of air and space between instruments. It's a much more expansive track. You know, vocals for me just have more decay with less drop off, creating a very expansive mix. Those same artists, Joy Oladukin, Sade, listening to female vocalists in particular, you get this sense of expansion that does carry much farther into space with the Freya Plus. And it's insanely addictive and very palpable. Now, listening to artists like Sade or Rhapsody or Joy Oladukin was just this very lush and addictive experience, because vocals here have this presence in the room that they're very intimate, but there's this sense of realism. Like, essentially what I think makes this so great is we're getting all of the control and the immediacy that comes with Class D, but then with the tubes of the Freya Plus, we get all this sweetness on the top end. And so when I have this guy paired with my Freya Plus, and I then pair it with my KEF LS50s, I'm just getting this incredible translation. It's just so very well controlled, and the roll-off is perfect in the top end. Like, I don't know why, but the Freya Plus, adding that into this combo changed the game for me. I really found myself zoning out to this amplifier. It's all-day listener. You can listen to this guy for hours and not feel fatigue. But I mean, like, it makes zero sense, and you will probably never pair a $1,000 preamp with a $100 amplifier. But I think that this is just like really screwing me up. And in so many ways, it's kind of proving all of the, like, you just need a basic amp people right. But like, in all seriousness, like, the Freya Plus smoothed out the AO10 and really opened up the soundstage in ways that my Fosi Audio ZP3 did not do. Now, it made the AO10 sound way better than a $100 amplifier. To conclude this, you know, again, like, why would anyone buy a $100 amplifier in 2026? Well, it's really simple for me, because I think that this guy removes a lot of the friction and issues that I may have with some particular pieces of equipment. I think that it's incredibly easy to listen to, and it just really doesn't demand a lot of attention. I think with the right speakers, it sounds far better than it has any right to. You know, paired with the ELACs, the AO10 comes closer to my tube amp than the A80 or the ZA3 kind of ever did. And maybe most importantly here, there is no power brick. And with that standard IEC power cable, it's just so basic, right? And obvious that this is how we should be treating electronics. But that's a conversation for another day. Whether or not we should have the power bricks or the wall warts or any of that stuff, or we should go back to this, I don't know. I think that for small rooms and efficient speakers at moderate listening levels, this is one of the most emotionally engaging budget amps that I've heard to date. And I think one of the few that I think makes Class D truly stop sounding like Class D altogether. So one of the things I forgot to talk about in this particular review is the remote control. Now, normally I don't talk that much about the remote controls because, you know, these guys are really just basic plastic kind of devices that basically have a couple buttons, and usually you get a couple different features, whether that's, you know, volume control, maybe backlight features or input selection. But other than that, you don't get a lot of features with these. Now, one of the things I'm not happy to report on is that the remote control on this guy has the same exact remote codes as my Topping D53. So the issue here is that when I use this remote control and I press buttons on this, it's also doing stuff to my DAC. So my DAC starts changing inputs, or it drops the volume, or it mutes it, or it's doing weird things to it that I can't quite even understand what's happening. I really would like them to figure this out or investigate this or find a way to change remote codes. Now, in my particular setup, this isn't that much of an issue because what I've done is I basically just set the input and I'm controlling the volume and everything from my preamplifier's controller, right? So it should be noted though that if you're trying to run, let's say a DAC, like the topping D30 or D50, sorry, directly into this guy, you may have issues with its remote control. Now, I just don't really know why that is, but that is something that I've experienced on this particular device. That's been my review, guys. If you liked this review, you have ideas for other things that I should review, or you just want to leave a comment down below, I'd really appreciate that. And thank you guys so much for watching. You know, recently I just hit 1,000 subscribers, or just over 1,000 subscribers, which is kind of like your first milestone on YouTube, which I'm just really happy about, and I really want to say thank you guys all for watching. So take care, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.